have several different videos demonstrating little bits and pieces from what I'm going to show you here, but I want to put it all into one video. It's because hat knitting is really popular, and I want to show you the techniques that I use to get a really tidy ribbed brim on all the hats that I knit. I love knitting hats. I've been on a hat knitting kick for a while. I think a lot of people have realized that knitting hats is a great gift. A knitted hat fits all the time, and it's kind of a little thing to knit and easy thing to give away. And when I'm knitting hats, my own hats, and talking about hat knitting with other people, I always use and recommend 16-inch circular needles. It just makes the whole thing really easy. You're not working, until you start decreasing for the crown, you're not working with double-pointed needles. So Fair Isle or ribbing or whatever, go really quickly on these 16-inch circulars. And 16-inch circulars are a special thing. They're, the actual needle part is shorter than a regular interchangeable set. So you have your regular interchangeable set, you know, like from size 4 to 11 or whatever, and then you have your separate 16-inch circular set. If you don't have one yet, I highly recommend asking for one for Christmas. And the one that I'm using here is from Knitter's Pride. Knitter's Pride actually sponsored this video, but I would have used these needles anyway if they had sponsored the video or not. This is my own personal set. You see it's missing some needles because I have them all in different pieces here. Here's the whole set. You can see all the needle sizes are in there. But Knitter's Pride does such a good job with these sets in that everything stays really tidy. You have all your needles, and then in this case, there's a zipper in the back where you have the cords and the keys, and everything else goes together. And this one is like this Paris stitched in silk. It's very pretty. That's the Knitter's Pride Royale, and if you look in the video description field below, or you click through to my website, I will have a link to where you can find these needles for yourself. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we're going to get this awesome tidy cuff on our hat. Here are my Knitter's Pride needles, and I'll show you really quickly. When you pick the needle size that you need, and you have your 16-inch cord, you put your key through the base of the needle like this, and the needle just screws onto the cord, and then you have this key there to hang on to while you hand tighten it the rest of the way. And that gives you this beautiful smooth join. Okay, so when I'm casting on for a hat, or really anytime I'm casting on more than just a few stitches, this is what I do. I always put, to figure out how much yarn I'm going to need for the long tail cast on, I leave myself about 6 inches and I start wrapping and counting. And each one of these wraps is enough for 1 stitch. So that's where I make my slip knot after I, count out 72 stitches or whatever it is. And for hats, I always use the long tail cast on or the German twisted cast on. You're just going to cast on. This is a long tail cast on. I'll give you a link to my German twisted cast on. So you're going to cast on all of your stitches for your hat. And once you have everything cast on, you're going to want to join in the round. And there are different ways of doing it. I will give you a link to a video where I demonstrate a few different ways of joining in the round, but I'm going to go ahead and join in the round the way that I always do it, which is just keeping things very simple. But before I make this into a tube, I want to make sure that nothing's twisted. So I'm looking, and all the knots from my cast on row are all lining up on the inside of this cord. So I grab a stitch marker, pop it on the right needle, and I just start knitting. That video I just gave you the link to will show you some different ways of doing it, but this is how I always do it. So I'm working knit 2, purl 2, and I start by working 2 knit stitches. I yarn forward, put the yarn forward between the 2 needles, and purl 2. Whoops. yarn back to knit 2, and the cast on row is always a little tight. Yarn forward to purl 2. Things go faster once you get past this row. So next I want to show you a little trick that I do to make sure that the ribbing looks really good. Because there's always a chance when you're working 2x2 rib that the second knit stitch ends up being kind of loose and wonky and doesn't look as tight as the knit stitch next to it. And this is what I do to make sure that that stitch always looks good. I'm going to knit 2 and then yarn forward to purl 2. I purl the first stitch, I pull the yarn back between the 2 needles and tug. And I know you probably can't see on camera, but a whole bunch of slack just picked up on that stitch when I did that. Purl the second stitch, knit 1, knit 2, yarn forward, purl, yarn back, tug. And the reason that this second knit stitch will sometimes end up looking loose is because the action of yarning forward to purl leaves a little drag on the yarn. And if you can tug on that first purl stitch to eliminate that drag, it keeps the second knit stitch looking really good. It's only on the first purl stitch after a knit. So knit 2, purl, tug. Okay. So now we'll say that you've finished your hat and you have this end to weave in. And a lot of times when you're weaving in these ends, you'll see that there is a jog in the very bottom, in the cast on row of the hat. And that's because when you're knitting in the round, you're knitting in a spiral. And I'm going to show you how to eliminate that jog by using the end that we already have to weave in. So I'm going to try to copy what I see here in the cast on row, which is a series of V's. I'm going to go, my working yarn's coming from here. I'm going to go under 2 legs of a V over here. Actually, I think I want to go in a different spot. I usually end up doing this a couple of times until I get it just the way I want it. There's my slip knot. I'm going to try going past the slip knot and then going back down in the same hole I came out of. And there we go. I have eliminated the jog that was there. And the last thing, well, I'll tell you again what I did. I went to the V, past the slip knot, under both legs of that V, and then back down into the same hole I came out of. And that's what I got. The last thing I want to do, the last little technique that I always use when I'm working on hats is to weave in this end. So I'm turning this inside out. And normally you weave in an end across, right? But if you do that, it's going to make it so you don't have the elasticity of the rib if you weave in across. So this is what I always do. I have these 2 columns of knit stitches on the, this is inside out. I'm going to just put my needle under the right leg of one stitch, the right leg of the stitch above it, the right leg of the stitch above it, just kind of winding my needle through and pull that through. And then I'm going to go back down by winding my needle through the stitches on the other side without reaching all the way down to the bottom. And I can cut that short. And because I've just woven in the end in 1 column of knit stitches, the elasticity is perfect. I haven't disrupted it at all. Well, there you go. One video chock full of all the techniques I use for a tidy ribbed cuff every time that I'm knitting a hat. This can be really any ribbed cuff. I know there are ribbed cuff in the bottoms of sweaters and everything else, but I think I for sure mostly knit them for hats. I hope it helps. Good luck.